What's up, everybody? Welcome in another new edition of Celtics Beat. I am back with you after, what I feel was a much-deserved vacation. Some of you out there may disagree. My family was happy that I took it. Adam Kaufman, Evan Valenti, and here with us, Steve Bulpett from Heavy.com, good friend of this program. And of course, he has been on the Celtics Beat and the NBA coverage for years and years, decades and decades. If ever there is someone that knows what it is like to follow this team into the NBA Finals, that's right. The holy crap, this team, the Celtics were in the NBA Finals edition of Celtics Beat here. It is someone like Steve Bulpett. Steve, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you guys as well.
So a story that I wish was true, a story that I would love to really sell. I don't think I could do it justice, but I'll paint the picture anyway. Back on January 28th, that was my birthday, turned 40 as a matter of fact. The Celtics were 25-25. And as my wife brought over a cake and I looked at the cake and the candles and I made a wish, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be nice if the Boston Celtics were in the NBA Finals? Wouldn't it be nice if they won a championship? Banner 18. I would love to tell all of you that is a reality. It's not because it would lead me to some superstitious or psychological place of attempting to take credit for all of this. Instead, it's just a fluky coincidence, and I'm really excited. Steve, how shocked more than anything else are you that they are here when 50 games into the regular season, they did not remotely resemble what we are watching right now?
Well, the part that was frustrating about watching them through those early games was that you knew they were capable of so much more. I mean, you don't get mad at a team that stinks. That's just who they are. No one was, throwing up their arms in disgust at the Detroit Pistons this year, the Sacramento Kings. It's like, okay, this is who they are. No big whoop. But the Celtics were utterly frustrating because, they clearly should have been a better defensive team earlier on. And, the ISO ball was just, they were killing themselves. And, the hero ball type of game they were playing is something that's gotten them knocked out of the playoffs, since 2018. And, here we were seeing it again. And it's like, will these people get it? And that was the frustrating part. So, yeah, you weren't thinking this was a finals team then, but you were just thinking they needed to be a whole lot better than they were, that they were capable of being a whole lot better than they were.
Fast forward months, obviously, you have the series by series, round by round vindication, if you will. The Celtics obviously, atoning for past sins, knocking out almost in succession the last three teams to oust them from the playoffs. They sweep the Nets and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They rally past the defending champion Bucks, albeit without Chris Middleton, but Giannis Antetokounmpo, defending finals MVP and multiple-time MVP of the league. And most recently, it was an ugly series, but a win is a win is a win. They outlast the Miami Heat, winning 3 straight games on the road, no less, in that series to improve to 7-2 on the road in the playoffs and a means of getting it done. And now deal with a Warriors team that is in the finals for the 6th time in the last 8 years, has 123 games of finals experience, not playoff experience, finals experience on that roster. And of course, the Celtics team that is here for the first time in a dozen years and has no experience, many deep playoff runs to the East Finals, no championship level experience on this roster. How much does that matter going in?
Outside of I know it's a numbers thing and it's easy to look at and make it something, but outside of knowing how to deal with ticket requests or whatever they have to deal with there, and just the altered media schedule, like today they have to practice in the same site so that media has access to both teams in a certain period of time. Outside of stuff like that, I don't think it matters at all. You get on the basketball court, you're not running down the floor thinking, gosh, I haven't been, wait a minute, this is a gymnasium. That's a line. It's, I don't mean to bring up the guy from Hoosiers, but it's like, the basket's 10 feet tall. And I think it's the same as our gym back in Hickory. Nothing. You're in the middle of playing a basketball game. You're too concerned about, holding on to the ball from the guy trying to take it from you. You're too concerned about, finding an open man to wonder about playoff experience and all that. I mean, this is the first game of the year for the Celtics, 102nd game of the year. If you haven't figured it out by now, you probably have bigger problems than we're talking about.
Do you think there's any sense of, and I want to get into this a little bit later in the show, much more in a big picture sense, but just as a little introduction to this topic, is there any sense of happy to be there that I don't feel like we're hearing any of that from the Celtics. If nothing else, it's the opposite. Getting here, Ime Udoka, getting here would be all for naught if we don't come out with the same intensity and win this thing. We don't raise Eastern Conference champion banners in Boston. We're about bigger things, about winning the title. But it's when you got young guys, obviously, that haven't been here and that have finally reached this stage and overcome some of the things that tough roads and adversity and all of it in the past. There could be just a mental component, an element of, man, we've arrived. We've gotten here. When in reality, then you've got the guys like the Warriors on the other side that would say, you haven't arrived, you haven't done anything until you've actually won a ring and you put that banner up. What do you think the sort of the mental side of this is in Boston right now?
Well, that's kind of all. That's a lot of what I heard from Jason Tatum today. I can't believe I got to pinch myself. I'm in the finals. This is what I dreamed of, and it's like, wake up. You're in the finals. I'm not sure, if he's talking like that because he's living in the moment of this is media day the day before the start of the NBA finals. But I assume he'll get, his head right as he steps on the court. But yeah, I think there is some of that to be concerned about. But they're going to get whacked pretty hard by the Warriors. That's a team that's going to make you dizzy with their ball movement. So they'll find out pretty quickly that they're in a fight. But yeah, I'm hearing some of that, we got over the hump. That you heard a lot of that after Game 7 in Miami. And by the way, that should have been a quicker series.
Yeah.
If they'd kept their head about them, that would have been a quicker series. So, they need to re-up here and say, okay, past is past. Here we are. And if you go home without a championship with this here, when are you going to be back? Are you going to be back? And you need to take advantage of the opportunity that's in front of you. And I'm guessing someone like Al Horford will be talking about that with them pretty sternly before the tip-off tomorrow night.
Yeah, I wonder if Ime is going to be a big part in that too. As someone that has accomplished a lot as an assistant coach and has a playing career. That's the one thing where Brad and him, they can't quite. Brad went to the NCAA championship as a coach. 2 years in a row was an amazing feat. But getting to the NBA Finals is a completely different story. I want to back up and just with Steve's point about, the lack of experience not meaning a lot. I think he's kind of running the money about that. I don't think anybody's really talking about this because I think you see the graphic all over the place that the Warriors have 123 games of final experience, which is, I think you'd rather have that than not have it. I'm not saying that's not a bad thing. But when you talk about the Super Bowl is one game where one single play can determine the outcome of the championship trophy, right? Where, if you're a little slow to start, unless you have Tom Brady, you can come back 28-3, that game's probably over. And if you're not used to, the wild 2 weeks of Super Bowl, it's a little bit different. It's the charade is different. Yes, there's a lot of media opportunities, stuff like that. But this is a whole series. At the end of a series, usually the best team ends up winning the series. And if Boston were only playing one game, yeah, that finals experience becomes kind of a big deal. But because it's best of 7,
right?
I'm kind of with Steve on this. I don't see it. I mean, it's obviously an advantage, but is it a ginormous advantage? I'm with Steve on this, Adam. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Well, that's the other thing I was just going to say is that if you play, let's say the series goes 7 games and that they, Celtics, generally speaking, stick to their rotation, some garbage time minutes, whatever. Like by the end of the series, Celtics as a roster are going to have like 60 plus games of NBA finals experience. Like the graphic is going to change dramatically. So it doesn't really matter. Right.
And it also, it counts for your experience with the group you're with.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's the team that went to the conference finals. Actually, the team that went to the conference finals in 18 has 3 of the same starters now, with Al Horford coming back. Mm-hmm. And you had Marcus Smart coming off the bench. So there is some experience here. But, Derek White and Rob Williams, who could be a huge factor in this series. It's what you have, and every group is different. You know what I mean? Even though the players can be largely the same, the chemistry, the chemical makeup of your team with a player here or a player there in your rotation can change things sort of dramatically. So every team is its own entity, and it's what experience you have with this group. So this group here now has gotten through 3 series, and they're in the 4th. So they've got playoff experience. They know that the games are a little bit different, but they know that if your head is up your posterior, these games can be awfully similar to how things were at certain points earlier in the season. So you've got to keep your wits about you.
Worth mentioning too, just rosters have changed dramatically over the years, obviously on both sides, especially Boston. But one thing, because Brad was the head coach, and now in many ways, pardon me, an architect of this current team, and bring in Ime Udoka and defense first mentality, elite defense, all of it. Stylistically, Celtics and Warriors match up very, very well. The Boston's 9-7 against Golden State during the Steve Kerr era, which I know doesn't sound overly impressive, but it's actually the best record any opponent in the NBA has against the Warriors during that period of time. So how do you think these two teams match up? I know you mentioned obviously Rob Williams is, could be a huge factor in this, and we'll get to him and his knee situation, but just roster to roster, strengths versus weaknesses, how they play. How do you like these two teams going head to head here?
Well, I'm guessing you read the story that it was posted on heavy.com today.
Naturally.
Okay. And the basic point of it is that the Warriors were concerned about playing the Celtics in 2018. They were very happy when the Celtics really kicked that Game 7 at home away to the Cavaliers and lost that. They were concerned about the Celtics' ability to switch defensively. They were concerned about the Celtics' big wings. And if anything, the Celtics are even better equipped now to play that kind of switching style. A story I had a little bit earlier in the week with talking about the moves that Brad Stevens has made. And everyone looks at the Al Horford thing and what Al has done. And the way he's performed, which he's a good basketball player. People keep kind of forgetting this. I don't know. But a lot of stuff he does doesn't show up in numbers wise right away. The spacing, his defensive position. But one of the most important things you've gotten from Al Horford is the ability to have everybody move over a chair, kind of. And now Jason Tatum, instead of being a 4, is now a 3. And probably going to have a size and or strength advantage there. Jaylen Brown goes from being a small forward to a 2 guard, and that changes things dramatically. Marcus Smart, who they resisted really giving the point guard's role to, but they've given it to him, and now you don't have an opponent being able to hunt a Kemba Walker or even a Kyrie Irving or a Terry Rozier. So that has changed things dramatically, and the Warriors, they would have loved to see Miami. I believe. I can tell you for sure they were happy to get the Cavaliers in 18, because I've spoken to the coach and I've spoken to players about that, in the years since, and back then actually as well. So that's a team that can give the Warriors trouble, but the Warriors are going to test that defense because they are the best ball movement team in the NBA. So, the Celtics match up well here. And the Warriors are also a team that can create some havoc defensively. This series will come down to whether the Celtics can keep their wits, and not get flustered as they did a lot of times during the year, and certainly in the Miami series at times that made it a longer series than it needed to be.
Warriors are favored in this series, narrowly, obviously, but just furthering your breakdown here, where do you think the Celtics ultimately have an edge here?
Defensively, I think, they're going to be able to defend the Warriors about as well as they can be defended. But the Warriors have the ability to, you can play perfect defense on them and they can still hit shots that, that brush your eyebrows as they go by. And, they can make shots.
Yeah.
And an offensive player should always have at least a slight advantage over his defender, because he knows where he's going to go before the defensive player knows where the offensive player is going to go. So, if it might come down to, who's hitting from the outside. Do the Warriors get hot and hit a bunch of shots, or do the Celtics run them off their spots well enough that it makes it even more difficult? But, you see these grand mood swings in the NBA during the regular season because teams go through hot streaks and cold streaks as a team, kind of team-wide at times from the three, and that the reliance upon the three-point shot has, created these mood swings. And I think, that you could see a lot of that in this series. You saw the blowouts going either way through the playoffs prior to this, and you could see more of it now.
Yeah, conference finals especially, it was just both of them, East and West. Neither one was a good series.
Yeah. How about Boston's size here? I think Boston, if you're going to talk about, this impacts, I think, both sides of the ball. I think the fact that they're a little bit bigger, kind of all over the place, is going to be advantageous potentially to them. On defense, obviously, as Steve alluded to, you're going to be able to challenge more shots because you're taller and longer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little more physical. I think it was Perk or somebody called. I think it was Perk, because I don't think Cedric would do this. Somebody called the Warriors tuxedo players, which I don't totally buy.
Yeah, that was Max actually.
I don't totally buy that. I'm not going that far. I think this team has seen a lot and has been roughed up quite a bit over the years. So I'm not really buying that. But the fact that Boston's a little bit bigger than them could help them in so many different ways: defensive glass, offensive glass, shooting over guys, challenging shots, being able to manipulate that switching defense they like to use. You can switch Marcus onto X player and you'll feel fine about it because of the way Marcus can defend at a guy his size. I do think when you boil it down, defensively versus offensively, this is going to be a juggernaut series. The Warriors offense has, been a battle-tested juggernaut for a decade, and Boston's defense has done really well over the years, but this year is truly special, which is the main attraction. But I think Boston's just overall size, if they can control the tempo with their size, again, clearing the defensive glass, not allowing a ton of offensive rebounds, and trying to be advantageous on their own offensive side of the glass is going to be big. Trying to win on the margins, right? And you look at that Miami series, when Boston didn't turn the ball over, guess what? They won. They won, and when they did, they lost. So if Boston can find a way to find those edges on the margins, that's going to be huge, because this series, if it all goes to plan and everybody stays healthy, this should be a fairly competitive series. It should be a 6 or a 7 game series, and that's where a 6 or 7 game NBA Finals is lost and won. That's one of my biggest things I'm looking for is does Boston size matter enough? And Adam, I don't know what you think about the biggest key to the series, but I think it's Boston size.
Look, there are a number of guys who could be reaches for a cliche, grabs it, X factors in the series. Grant Williams, if Grant Williams is hitting threes, X factor. If Derek White is giving you scoring, if Brad Stevens loosens up rotation a little bit and gives you more Peyton Pritchard, he could be an X factor because he's going to push the ball. One of the best things that Peyton Pritchard does, and I really think the Celtics were lucky in Game 7 that they didn't need Peyton Pritchard to come in late, because he'd been kind of put in the cooler by Ime
Yeah.
throughout the course of that game. But what he gives you, whether a shot's going in or not, is he pushes pace. And this is a team, the Celtics need to push pace because they don't want to play against a defense that's loaded up. And the size thing is huge. One guy, I think, I think I might have a more confidence in Boston in this series if I knew for sure that Rob Williams was going to be healthy.
Yeah.
And what we've seen of Rob Williams during the regular season in this series now. His ability to protect the rim and to get out and challenge 3-point shooters, that's just, that's a gift that any team would love to be able to have.
Yeah, the challenge of, what was it, Gabe Vincent's shot on the left side was like only he's one of two people in the world that can make that block. Maybe him and Giannis. It's a very, very, very short list. And
let's say this too. At the other end of the floor, I think Rob Williams' contributions are underrated because the Celtics, among their problems that they occasionally encounter, is driving the lane and not being under perfect control. But if you're a guy that, if you're Jalen or Jason and you drive the lane, and of course you're going to see bodies coming at you, that if you look up and among the players in the Warriors team photograph that are coming to visit you, if one of them is their big guy, hey, I can just flip this ball toward the rim and I got a guy that'll clean that up for me. You don't even have to know, you don't have to see Rob Williams, but if their big comes over, toss it up by the rim. If you're going to be, if it's a choice of that or dribbling it off your foot, just toss it up. And Rob's got a very good, a better than average shot of taking it and throwing it through. And that's, that's a lovely bonus to have. So, you mentioned the coaching thing and Brad, and I think this is a player driven thing. I think the combination of what they have for talent and the fact that these guys have realized that they've had it in their hands before to be better than they are, or than they were. And they've screwed it up. And I think they've come to this point and realized, okay, this is what we have. And I think it's a little bit of maturity that's crept in here that's got them to this point without having, without stumbling too much.
To your point, I mean, and I won't say I feel bad, and we'll get to predictions later and all of that, but I would feel much better if we knew that we had a reasonably healthy Rob Williams right now. Nobody's a perfect health. Marcus certainly isn't, excuse me. I'm not, obviously. Al Horford is, they're managing his minutes as best they can, but the guy turns 36 on Friday. Like, obviously, he's got a lot of mileage on there, but with Rob, I mean, 18 playoff games so far, he's played in 11. So he's missed almost half. His minutes are right around 21 on average. He really hasn't looked himself since the surgery. There have been flashes, but not in any sort of consistent sense, not even in a single game. If you told me we were going to get Rob Williams playing 25, 27 minutes and that he'd be able to play back-to-back games, which maybe I feel a little more optimistic about in this series just because the games are more spread out than they were in the Miami series or Milwaukee series. But it's just, I think he is, as both of you were saying, he's an enormous X factor in the series just because you don't know. And if you don't have him, or you don't have him that you expect to have, you need more from Grant. Your rotation tightens, your bench shortens. You have so much less flexibility, less size. The Warriors are a team that, I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't, read the numbers earlier today. But the Celtics between these two teams are actually the team that is more reliant on the three, whereas the Warriors are a team that attacks much more inside. You need to have Rob in the paint. You need to have him in order to try and slow that down.
Yeah, I mean, and look, the Warriors play an unselfish game that I think is a model for every basketball team from grade school on up. If I'm Ime, I'm showing them here. See what these guys do? That's what we want to do. And yeah, I think that Williams, like we look at his numbers, everything's analytics, and we look at blocks and we look at plays defended. I mean, if there's, I think I mentioned this earlier during the season, if the NBA had a category for scares, then I think Rob would be like high up in that. You know, he changes what you do when you turn the corner. You know, and hesitation for an offensive player that's kind of, you know, not quite as bad as a live ball turnover, but it's pretty close.
Let's go back to Jason Tatum. We haven't talked a whole lot about him, and again, you know, obviously his place in the finals MVP conversation. He's fresh off winning the first ever Larry Bird Eastern Conference Finals MVP trophy, and you know, I have
by Cedric Maxwell.
Yeah, presented by Cedric Maxwell, not Larry Bird. Max was, as Evan and I have talked about, he was electric. He was absolutely electric, no doubt about it.
Did Max want the award to be named after Dirk Nowitzki?
Max was on fire.
He was killing. He was unbelievable. His energy was off the charts.
Yeah, I mean, his team just went to the finals. He's excited, as he should be. With Tatum, though, so I don't want to turn this into a longer conversation because we've talked about it in past podcasts, but you know, I am not, Steve, of the, and this is not like a new thing. I've been saying this for quite a while. I'm not quite there yet when it comes to, you know, Jason Tatum superstar. I feel like obviously he will be. He's on the cusp. I recognize he's an all-star. He's first team all-NBA. He just, you know, pardon me, won that trophy we talked about, helped eliminate Durant and Giannis and Butler. You know, he's averaging 27, 7, and 6 here in the playoffs. Guy is elite. The problem, you know, my hang up is that there's still a little bit of a lack of consistency there. You know, for me to one, I don't think like there are 15 superstars in the NBA. Like it's a small elite group, and that group needs to have season-long consistency. Not just, you know, Jason Tatum so far has given us a half season of otherworldly play, another half season of phenomenal play, but we haven't had a full season. Like, people forget earlier this year, by his standards, how bad Jason Tatum was shooting the ball. He's turned it around. He's recovered. He's had overall a very good playoff. But what I'm building up to and saying all this is, who gives a damn what I say? Jimmy Butler called him a superstar. Draymond Green called him that guy. You know, you got to have that guy to win a championship. Are we watching, you know, the superstar turn right now? You know, are we beginning next season with Jason Tatum is a superstar, or are you already there?
I think if Jason Tatum were playing for another club, you would call him a superstar. I think the fact that you see him every night, you know, you notice things that you wouldn't pay as much attention to were he playing somewhere else. You'd go, wow, that guy, you know, you'd love if you could get a guy like that on your team. Wow. But I think he made his alteration during this season. I think I tweeted something like that, you know, Jason Tatum being able to score a bunch of points in different ways is a star. Jason Tatum finding teammates, making opponents pay for double teams and things like that. That's a superstar. And what we leave out of this equation that I think separates him from a lot of other guys in the upper pantheon of NBA players is that Jason Tatum, you know, is a really good defender. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that doesn't, when you look at a scorer, you kind of discount that, or you don't pay as much attention to it as I think you ought to, being that kind of a two-way player. I mean, we've talked about this a bunch over the years, but Larry Bird was a really good defender, but Larry Bird had life kind of easier when up and through the point where Kevin McHale played on the broken foot in '87. For example, when the Celtics played the Hawks, Kevin McHale would guard Dominique. Robert Parrish would guard Kevin Willis. Larry would guard Tree Rollins, who wasn't getting the basketball. So Larry was able to play passing lanes and things like that. The Bird-Dominique shootout was in '88, the year after McHale played on the broken foot, and could never be the same defensively after that. So, we look at him as Jason Tatum as an offensive player, but think about him defensively and what he did with Kevin Durant. And again, there's a lot of switching involved and things like that. But Jason Tatum involved defensively, engaged defensively, is among the best handful of two-way players in the game.
I will say, going back to something you said in that point, the Tatum, and this really kind of happened mid-season, and obviously since we've seen some great moments with this in the playoffs, Tatum finally showing a willingness to trust his teammates with some elite passing and playmaking has really taken his game to another level.
Sure, absolutely, yeah, and it just goes across. It's a team in context as well. Mm-hmm. This team was playing terrible isolation basketball. I mean, 25 dribbles, and then when Jaylen Brown got the ball in the next trip, it's like, I ain't giving this thing up. I ain't gonna see it again. But see, that's the part that bothered me, because over the past few years, these guys knew that it was not only best for the team to give the ball up and move and get it back in a position to finish, but it was better for them individually. And they still didn't do it on a regular basis. That was the frustration. The one thing I'll say for the Celtics is that they haven't leaned on the adage of, hey, no one believed in us. All you people that doubted us during the year, because the way that they were playing earlier in the season, they were doubting themselves.
Yeah, it was justified.
So, people in Boston, people who follow the Celtics, have followed them for a long time, just by seeing regularly over the years the different versions of the club, they know what good basketball is. They know what good basketball isn't. No Celtic that's my favorite Celtic trivia question. No Celtic has ever led the league in scoring, but 6 players who played for the Celtics have led the league in scoring for other teams, but no Celtic has ever led the league in scoring. There's a point to be made there.
That's interesting.
Yeah, no, and that is the evolution of Tatum, though. It's the ability, because I go back to like Dwayne Wade saying it, I think maybe a year ago or so, or maybe it was this year. It was, Tatum has every shot in the book. He has it down. I mean, whether he makes it or not is one thing, but he can pretty much attempt anything he wants out there. And I'm not going to call him too crazy, but it's the ability to make the other guys better around him that was really the kind of the final step, so to speak. And the one thing that I think is really interesting, and Steve kind of sprinkled it in there a little bit, is the fact that he can get the ball back and then and still do something with it, right? The fact that he knows that when it gets down to the end of the shot clock, Grant Williams isn't going to sit out there and dance trying to get a 3. No, he's probably getting the ball to Jason Tatum as much as a lot of other guys are. And to Tatum's credit, his work off the ball to get it back has been a really nice development too. I mean, that's the biggest thing about Curry. Curry is lethal for a lot of different reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is he just never stops moving. He's just always in motion, always running through screens, fighting through bodies, trying to find an angle to get a shot, because if Steph has any daylight, he will take a shot and he'll probably make the shot. So Tatum's, it's kind of twofold. His ability to give it up, find his teammates on double teams, just been, that's all Miami did was double Tatum and make him give up to somebody else. Miami was not going to let Tatum beat them really too much in the last couple of games. Tatum's willingness to get off it quick. You hear, Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy praise it throughout the entire series, where Tatum, as soon as the double comes, he sees the double and just moves it to the right place. And the play kind of, continues, whether it's Marcus Smart throwing up threes at the end of games, or them actually working the ball around is a whole different thing. But then Tatum's relocation skills and trying to find a way to be productive off the ball and find a way to get himself in a better position to help his teammates succeed. So it's a whole combination of things. I think, Adam, you had me fooled. You had me with the, I'm not totally sure if he's a superstar, but he's definitely in the star category. You went on and on and on. I was like, is Adam going to, I don't know if you saw my face. I know it's tough.
I didn't know.
my eyes were like bulging out of my head. I could not believe what I was listening to. Even Nick Wright, who is one of the biggest Celtics haters on the planet, has Jason Tatum in club superstar. So,
I was just
he's got him in there, and he's got to be in there.
I was building up to Jason Tatum sucks. You want to trade him? He's not any good. Make sure we clip this. Let's put that out on YouTube.
Even with what we're talking about and Jason Tatum's improvement, the Celtics still screwed up royally during games. Even games that they won, they would go through periods of, the ball stayed on the outside. Look, it's harder to move the ball against a switching defense. Okay, but you still have to put the work in and get the ball moving side to side. 3-pointers, the best 3-pointers you get are when you get the ball to the paint first and you throw it out to beat a closeout, or at very least get your shooters squared up and stepping into a shot. And, the Celtics would go for stretches without investigating, without exploring the paint first. And you've got to do that. And, just Jason Tatum just giving the ball up and going here, that doesn't do it alone. You've got to get the ball moving side to side, give the defense the opportunity to make a mistake. How many times have you seen a team score and score on the Celtics, and you see Celtic players trying to go, "Hey, that was you. You were supposed to." What? You've got to give the opponent the opportunity to screw up. Mm. If you get the defense moving, even if you don't score in that possession, there's a value to that possession because you've made the defense work, and your floor balance is better. If you want to criticize Jason Tatum, the thing I would say is when you go to the basket and you think you get fouled, which would be, I think, every time he thinks he gets fouled, and then you're complaining about the call and you're not getting back on defense, that's where it's like, dude, that cannot happen in this series because, one pebble rolling down the hill with the Golden State Warriors can turn into an avalanche in a heartbeat. So, what we're looking at with the Celtics is fundamental stuff. You don't have to make these crazy Pete Maravich passes. Simple hit singles, quick passes, short passes. One of the reasons the Celtics love playing with Rob Williams is the ball doesn't stick in his hands. Mm-hmm. But then you're playing against the Warriors that have the shortest time of possession in their hands of any team in the league. So this is your example. And, if they play that simple, smart, fundamental basketball, then, like you said, physically, defensively, they're in great shape against this team. And they have an opportunity to beat a very good basketball team in the finals, a very good opportunity. And, can you ask for much more than that?
Well, as you're saying, and just to add to it, I mean, we've been talking about it for I guess at this point months on this podcast, going through the playoffs. I felt, and I think Evan did too, that the Celtics were, especially with Ben Simmons out, decidedly better than the Nets. I was not worried about the Celtics losing to the Nets. I felt with Middleton out, decidedly better than the Bucks. Series that could go either way, but I felt the Celtics had the edge. Decidedly, I think Miami was the worst of the three in my mind, even though that went 7. Ugly series, a team that Celtics absolutely should not, under any circumstances, have lost to. Fortunately, they didn't. This would be, a podcast with a much different tone right now. You're going to the finals, though. This is the first time I don't feel that way. I don't feel, that's not to say the Celtics can't win. Of course they can. But I don't feel like they go in with this upper hand, or they go in as the decidedly better team. So, as you were just talking about, and I'm sure Ime Udoka is having this conversation with the players, get back on defense, protect the ball, don't bitch at the officials, all the little things that the Celtics could do and have done to kind of beat themselves in some of the games they've lost along the way. They can't afford a moment of that in this series against the Warriors.
And one of the things I'm going to be looking at is when Steph Curry, when Klay Thompson, even Jordan Poole, when these guys hit shots from, the
logo
being heavily guarded, wearing a Celtic, on them, and they still hit a shot. Look at the Celtics shoulders. Do they slump? Because a lot of teams, you'll see that they'll, no, it's like you have to stay the course. You can't, go away from what you're doing. You can't get depressed because this team is good. They have the ability to make those shots. You can play perfect defense, and Steph Curry can pull up from the logo, from near midcourt, and you can be guarding him there too. But he may get an inch on you, and that's enough for him to do with his quick release. And these are, I'll throw in this one thing now in case there's anybody young listening to this. In all seriousness, a few years ago, I had to go over to a Warriors practice and do a Steph Curry story. Practice finishes, we talked to the coach. Steph's out after practice, going around the perimeter, shooting 5, 5, 5, and 5 spots, 5 threes at each, back and forth around the perimeter, back and forth. So he finishes. We have I talked to him for a bit for the interview, and we reinforce our Dayton versus Davidson bet, $5 standing bet. I told him he's my retirement plan. But by the way, he's leaving. I goes, hey, good to talk to you. Nice seeing you again. And it's like, wait a minute. By the way, how many shots did you get up after practice? You have 250. It's like, okay, he didn't forget how to shoot on the flight from DC to Boston. This is the greatest shooter that the game has ever known. Mm-hmm. So like when I, talk to any a high school team in the area or something like that, I'll say, can you come by and say, look, this is what he's doing. What do you need to do? When you get free time, when I go back out to Dayton and teach for a week every year, if I talk to the team at all, tell these guys, look, when you get free time here, you got your books, whatever, get your shots up every day. Find time to get your shots up. So my point is that these guys aren't just, you can see Steph and he's doing the put him to sleep thing, and he's doing the wiggle dance and all this here. This guy has put in the work to be this. And, so don't ever think that these guys are just playing off pure talent. This is hard work that these guys have put in to get to hit a shot from the half court logo and have it not be a big deal.
But many would say, and I would agree, that we haven't talked enough about Ime Udoka. And, I do think there are a lot of great articles have been written about him. The guy, pardon me, is he's certainly getting his due, and he should be, after so many questioned him, early in the season and his first experience as a head coach in the NBA, overall, and obviously finished 4th, 6th, something like that in the coach of the year voting. He had an exceptional year, by the time the regular season ended, and the playoffs have been terrific. He's won multiple game 7s. Here he is in the finals, learned under Greg Popovich, obviously a guy that has, more than his fair share of championship and championship level experience as well. So a good guy to learn at the feet of. What is the X factor? If you could, pinpoint something. Evan kind of alluded to this earlier, just the fact that he's been there. He's a former player. He's well-traveled. He was a journeyman. He had worlds of different experience that he can relate to the guys in ways that Brad Stevens never could. Brad, he got this team to the East Finals, 3 times? It's and worse teams at that in many cases. But Ime has them here. He has them here now in the NBA Finals, 4 wins away from a championship. What is that thing that Ime has that has helped them get here?
I think he's got players who are more mature than they were in the past, that have screwed up in the past, and maybe now they're ready to listen and win. As far as moving the ball and things like that, excuse me.
Contagious through the Zoom is what it is.
Yeah. No, it's
you're right here.
Yeah. This is actually better than the last week and a half or so. So you've had these guys knew what to do and knew that it was the best for them and still wouldn't do it. And Brad was putting them in positions to succeed in all these things. You don't think Brad was telling them to move the basketball? I mean, and they wouldn't do it, and a lot of times it wasn't because the players were being jerks. It was like, okay, late in the game, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to go make us a play. Well, that's very gallant of you, but, and maybe you'll make the shot sometimes, but you've just taken your team out of its offense, And so, I think getting these guys at this point and having them screw up earlier in the year made it even more likely that, they could see the bottom and say, okay, this needs to be turned around. So I think that's benefited Ime tremendously. As far as players relating, teams win when players play for each other. Okay. Everyone talks about Pat Riley, this great coach. We used to go into practices in the NBA and watch them from the start. I remember sitting in the forum watching the Lakers practice under Pat Riley, and he goes, okay, let's go on to the next thing. And Magic Johnson says, no, guys, let's run that one again. Okay, if you're the coach, life is good. Mm-hmm. All right. So when teams take ownership and police themselves and do all those things, yeah, a coach can say, okay, look, here's what we're going to do here and there. This is how we're going to attack the zone. And I don't think anyone would argue that Brad Stevens isn't very good at all those things. And Ime is good as well. But, it's the situation. I think Ime's done fantastic in terms of where he was earlier in the year to where he is now. If you guys could have heard the conversations I had with NBA people, coaches, front office people, players even, earlier in the year, they were killing Ime. I mean, just torturing him. I can't believe, and it's like, you got to wait it out and see what happens, So I think Ime's done a fantastic job. But I think it always comes down to me. For me, it always comes down to the players. Are you taking ownership? Are you doing, what's right? And these guys know what's right. So yeah, I think. Look, and are there blind spots? Sure. Like we mentioned, if they had needed Peyton Pritchard late in the game in Game 7 against the Heat, would he have been in rhythm? Would he have had enough touches? You've got to nurture your shooters. I happen to think that Aaron Nesmith's a really good basketball player, and I wonder if they're going to be able to retrieve him or not. If they're going to be able to get him and have the coach be confident enough to say, look, we're going to make sure you get your minutes and touches during these games, the regular season games, so that you're ready, so that you're a viable option for us late in the year in the playoffs. Certainly Miami has done that with its shooters over the years. Duncan Robinson came out of nowhere and was a very important player for them, for a few years here. He gave way to Max Strus, who was a guy that had kicked around. But certain coaches, if you got to commit to shooters, you got to commit to getting them their touches. So, are we going to see Peyton Pritchard be even better for this team next year? Are you going to see Aaron Nesmith become part of the rotation? Or are you going to see Aaron Nesmith in a year or two come back to haunt the Celtics playing for someone else?
Yeah, entirely possible.
Yeah. Like Max Strus hitting big shots.
I was just going to say,
I expect.
Still thinking about that.
I give him time. It was impressive because he would be cold as ice, and it would hit like 2 or 3 in a row that were huge. You're like, where the hell was this been? But to watch him and Javante, do well on their teams, I also take a lot of pride in that too. So
the hardest transition for a player coming from college is in college. Any guy that gets to the NBA, pretty much in college, he could shoot when he wanted to. The ball would be in his hands whenever he so desired, for the most part. Coming to the NBA, where you're maybe the third or fourth option, which maybe you don't see the ball for a few possessions, that's another reason why ball movement and getting the ball moved around is so important, because it's, I think, unfair to expect, as happened with Shemi Ojale, that he hadn't touched the ball for 5 possessions and he's standing in the corner where he's supposed to. All of a sudden the ball comes to him, and now you haven't shot in a week and a half, and can you please make this shot now? That's kind of unfair to ask.
Yeah.
And, but with the ball moving more now, you see a guy like Grant Williams, essentially in the same role, but being much more effective.
Yeah. Just more touches. Maybe 23s in game 7?
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a lot.
I think he
got him up. He's still shooting.
Yeah. So I only have a couple of things left,
memory.
and then we'll let Steve get back to his night and let people listening get back to their lives. Pardon me, but
we'll get back to our lozenges.
Yeah, not soon enough. Let me tell you. So I preface this point by saying this: there were so many people. We've all seen them in our Twitter mentions or articles that were even written that were lining up, ready to proclaim a loss to the Heat, a series loss to the Heat, as one of the most devastating playoff exits in Boston sports history. Had the Celtics lost that series, I don't even know what this offseason would have sounded like. People would have reverted back probably to, you got to get rid of one of the Jays. This just can't work. Who knows what it would have done to their confidence, blah, 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 blah. I'm thrilled that no matter which way the series goes, I am choosing to believe that this will not be an offseason where people are proclaiming the Celtics season a failure, which is the first time that has happened in a long, long time, quite frankly. There's always been some sort of hang up about, what could have been, or had they stayed healthy, or what if, they didn't have the COVID injuries or the late season injuries or absences or injuries or whatever else. So there's that. I'm happy that this offseason should have a generally nice tone about it after the Celtics have reached this point. Makes it sound like I'm just happy to be here. But with the finals, and I'm confident in saying this because it's already started, if the Celtics win this series, Steve, it's going to be, there are going to be articles written, are they the Warriors? Is this the beginning of a dynasty? The Warriors players have already been asked about it. They were about the same ages in 2015 when they got there and won for the first time. Is this going to be Tatum, Brown, Williams, Smart, and so on? Is this going to be the start of getting there multiple years running, and the powerhouse in the East is the East Boston's to lose? Or are they going to get there 6 out of 8 years? Are these guys getting, pardon me, multiple titles? All of that. That's if they win. If they lose, it's going to be, are the Celtics the Thunder with Durant and Harden and Westbrook, and we all think they're going to get there again, and they never will. And this was the team that almost was but never was. This is what the narrative is going to be, depending on the outcome of this series, because again, some of this has already begun. How do you view this in a larger scale, this series, as to what what's to come after?
I think the Celtics need to be competitive. I think if they play to their max, they'll be more than competitive in this series. But if they get washed out here, then it's going to be the abuse will flow. I'll tell you a quick thing. Before Game 7 in 2010 against the Lakers, it's a few hours before game time. I see Ainge sitting courtside at the Staples Center. So on the off chance that someone important will call him and I can see what it. I sit down and we just start talking. He said, what's funny? He goes, we're a few hours before tip-off here. Tonight, one of these teams is going to win. One of these teams is going to lose. The team that wins this game tonight is going to have it all figured out, and they're going to be the model that other teams need to follow. Mm-hmm. And the team that loses, they're going to rethink everything. And do they bring back their same team and, back to the drawing board for that team? Do they break up? What do they do? He goes, and it's going to be that much of a difference between who wins and who loses. He goes, and we're sitting here right now next to this basketball court, and we don't know which team is which right now.
That's
right. And so that's, does that not say it all?
Yeah.
And then you had the game where the Celtics are up by a bunch, and they don't post up. KG doesn't go inside. They start missing long shots. The Lakers are going back the other direction on fast breaks. And, I remember also that night, you remember Kobe did not have a good game at all. It was meta world peace that, kind of broke your back, right?
Mm.
And
Powell was good in that game. Wasn't Powell good in that game?
yeah, well, but it was, you had meta, from the, coming from the drive-up window of the, get your mind right thing. I'm sure they got those all around Southern California.
Yeah.
But after that game, a close friend of mine since passed away, rest his soul, Frank Hamlin, was an assistant coach for the Lakers. And I knew he wasn't going to hang out at the victory party long. And I was staying in Marina Del Rey, and there was a dive bar in Playa Del Rey. And that's where Frank would hang out. And I remember saying, I'm going to drive there. I drive there, and Frank's there with his beer saying, yeah, we were one who's going to screw up that game first. He goes, lucky your guys won that battle. And, but on such small things, things turn, and the Lakers were celebrated. And if the Celtics had won that, right, if they win in 2008, they don't win in 2009, Garnett is hurt. Right. So that it kind of ends there. But if they'd have won in 2008 and 2010, we'd be looking at that team a lot differently than we do now. Mm-hmm. They got one title out of them, and then things kind of dissolve later on. And then they make the big move in 2013, and they get back to the finals, and they rebuilt their team kind of on the fly. And as much as you can be, I'm just even thinking about earlier, we were talking about how the Celtics were so frustrating to watch earlier this season. Think of how many franchises, we talked about their futility, getting to the conference finals and not getting over that and making it to the finals. Think of how many franchises would love to have that mistake, to get to that point and fail at least at that level. I'm not saying that it should make you any happier necessarily, because you're supposed to do that when you get high draft picks. But think of the Sacramento Kings and these teams that have had high draft picks for years. And just if you're a fan of the Celtics, you've had meaningful basketball to watch, and you went from the trade in 2013 and you got back pretty quickly. It took some good fortune. Isaiah Thomas, he kind of helped rebuild you on the fly.
Yep.
So it's just weird how things work out, and, things are tenuous, things are fragile.
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier today. If you think about this past series, I was listening to latest Simmons pod while I was walking my dog, and he was talking about how, maybe people overreacted at the end of that game, because a lot of the noise coming out of Game 7 against Miami was like, wow, the Celtics almost blew this one. Miami was so close, whatever. And I took that line, and as they were rambling on in the background, I was thinking about how if Jimmy Butler's shot goes in, how we're having the discussion about, they gotta really fix this team differently. They've had this can't be the same team. They can't bring this back. But yet here we are in the NBA Finals, and if Boston, is competitive in this series, you're not going to really do a whole lot. And what one shot can do for the future of your franchise. Steve, as you were talking there, talking about how teams would be happy to get back to the Eastern Conference Finals and be there. All I could think about was the Atlanta Hawks, who did that. And then all of a sudden this year, they were a nightmare and they got to the playoffs, yeah, but not how they wanted to. And they faced the Heat and they get slaughtered, and then their season's over. So, my point being a few things. A, it is hard to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. B, it's even harder to get to the finals. And C, being a GM must be extremely difficult, because a lot of what your future decisions are based on like razor thin margins sometimes, or a ball bouncing a certain way, a Kawhi Leonard shot bouncing on the rim and going in. Well, there goes a whole storyline that you could have written for some other team. It's sports is tough, and understanding
Kevin Durant's sneaker being on the line.
Exactly. There's so many things that, so many small things that make big impacts on future decisions. And it's
Gordon Hayward getting injured,
minutes
up in his first game.
Yeah.
I mean, for all Kyrie's weirdness, guy's a tremendous basketball player.
Mm-hmm.
If that group had stayed together, but then again, do you have Jason Tatum as you know him now?
Right.
If Gordon Hayward doesn't have that injury,
Yep.
the Celtics knew that Jason Tatum was good. I don't think they knew he was going to be that good that soon. But getting those reps, brought him along faster. And hey, Celtics could have won in the bubble, but Hayward injured again. But he was not really the same. Mm-hmm. And here he is when he was able to play in Charlotte, they were a different team. But and the fear is, like I said, a guy gets an injury that doesn't necessarily knock him out, but doesn't allow him to be the player that you're paying him to be. And that's the fear a lot of teams have when they give out these big contracts. If James Harden gets an extension, he's going to be able to play, but is he going to be able to, in a year or two, is he going to be the player that you're paying him to be? And there's a finite amount of money, essentially, I guess, where you can be a taxpayer and go way over, but there's at least some drag on salary. But if you pay a guy, if you go and say, look, this is what we need to pay to keep him, and you make a mistake in that regard, it's hard. And it's really hard for like the small market teams. It's even harder on them to overcome their mistakes financially.
As is typical, Steve, far too generous with his time. So let's wrap here. Let's go around. Predictions for the NBA Finals. Steve, you're the guest. What do you expect?
Well, the only way I ever predict these things is to say if each team plays to its max.
Yep. And
I honestly believe if both teams play to their maximum ability, I think Boston can win this series, because that would require them not turning the ball over. That would require them moving on offense. But I think their defense is going to be good enough to throw a wrinkle into the Warriors.
Ev, what do you got?
Steve's point of if both teams play their max is a good one, because
we haven't seen that from the Celtics in a while.
This series can go a million different ways. Injuries are going to play a huge factor in that, so it's impossible to really kind of forecast that. But if I had to make a prediction, I think Grandy's had the stat, and he's had it all. Well, he's been chirping it quite loudly lately, but he's been keeping track of this all season. This is one of the best road teams in NBA history. I mean, I think they're the fourth best NBA road team in the history in terms of differential, which is sneeze at. So I will say that
the playoffs now.
Boston will win Game 7 on the road, and they will win the NBA title. I think it's just somewhat poetic in a way. It's been fun regardless, but I do think this is a very special team. This defense, Adam, I don't know if you remember, I've been talking about this defense for a long time, because when you hold opponents to the 0-4 Pistons field goal percentage, I'm going to take notice of that. And I know they were blowing teams out, but their defense was like otherworldly good. I think they'll hang their hat on that. Golden State will get a couple on the road as well, because for some reason Boston has a hard time beating teams on their own floor, but away from the Garden it seems to work. So I will take Boston in 7. I think they will win the NBA title.
Well, look, we've been talking about this defense since the offseason, just based on the additions and the way Brad Stevens has won in hiring Ime, a defensive minded coach, but then just the roster changes that have further shaped it along the year, and I think they've exceeded most people's expectations. So I will hedge like anyone is capable of hedging, and I will say
only
this.
You could hedge like this, Adam. Only
I know. So if I am telling you what my heart says, I am going Celtics in 7, and Marcus Smart game-winning 3 to win the thing. But if I'm actually placing money on this, Warriors in 6.
Okay.
If
But
we're
I'm-
betting cash money, you can't bet against. It'd be hard to bet against the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
But let's be fair to ourselves and to everybody that has to make a pick here. Anyone that tells you that they know what's going to happen in these games
Yeah.
from night to night is trying to put one over on you.
Yeah.
It's and especially look in media, it's what's required of the job, right? Remember Rick Fox was doing some TV a few years ago, and we were at an all-star game somewhere, and he was about to go on the air, and I forget what the issue was. And I go, where do you come down on this? He goes, I haven't quite decided yet. He goes, but when I do decide, I'll say it with conviction,
Yeah.
because that's the job. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you this here, and when you're trying to figure out what's going to happen, especially if you're going to make a bet, if you realize the closer you are to the game, the more you know, actually, the more you're inside and are able to talk to players and see players just in their quiet time prior to a game or whatever, the more you realize how many different factors can impact upon the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been some wild stories over the year, particularly with regular season games, of strange things that have happened on road trips with teams that we probably can't discuss right now.
No.
But I mean, there are so many things that can impact upon you. So, if you're going to be betting, I'd say, pick your favorite team, the team you're going to root for, throw a couple of bob down and go with that and enjoy yourself if that helps your enjoyment. But to think that you're going to be able to figure this out definitively, basically you're trying to figure out whether the Celtics will, hit the open man or dribble the ball off their foot with a minute to go in a game, and you just don't know.
Well, like I said off the top of the show, we always have basketball in June, but for the first time in a while, we have basketball in June. I'm thrilled for a couple more weeks of this, and more great content coming up on CLNS throughout, obviously, the finals, and great coverage on site as well. You know what? I don't care how any of us sounds. I just care that the Celtics are healthy.
Yeah.
And, so as long as they're feeling good, I'm great. So
Power through it.
You've got no sympathy at all for my knee issues. What a great way to treat your guests.
It's unbelievable.
How do we get
For
away
the
with
last time on CLNS, Celtics beat Steve Bulpett. He's never coming back. With no respect for his
ball
name.
game.
For M. Valenti, for Steve, I'm Adam Kaufman. We'll talk to you again soon. Go Celts. Take 1 out of 2 in the Bay. It's all you need to do. See you later.